Welcome to the Nagrik Podcast with Hari. What are the broad levers through which greenhouse gases are kind of getting into the atmosphere? Of course, put simply, any form of human activity leads to that. But I think to better structure this problem, it'll be good to understand what are the 2 to 3 broad levers through which, or which are the major factors through which, let's say, the greenhouse gases are the sources of the greenhouse gases.
Yeah, sure. So, broadly speaking, there are three. Uh, the most important one is fossil fuels. Uh, Fossil fuels contribute around 70% of greenhouse gases, right? The second is industry, contributes around 20%. And the third is land use changes and agriculture. They contribute around 10%. Now, if you look at fossil fuels, their primary use is in three categories. The first is power generation. Even today, uh, two-thirds of the electricity worldwide is produced using fossil fuels: coal, gas, petrol, right? Primarily coal, and it's kind of adding probably close to 25 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year, right? That's the primary source.
Basically, just to make the maths clear, so we talk about fossils being 70, industry being 20%, and the land use being 10. And out of that 70%, the two-thirds is for electricity purpose. So we can very well say that close to about 40 to 45% of the net greenhouse gas emissions is coming from the electricity generation through.
I read just recently is 42% of the greenhouse gases are coming from thermal sources of electricity generation.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's one, the power generation. The second is transportation. Transportation uses around or emits around 29% of the greenhouse gases out of the fossil fuel category. Overall, I think it's probably 20-21%. But right, so both, I mean, or all three modes: the land, the sea, and the air travel. Right. So that's the second. The third place where fossil fuels are used is heating, both industrial and home heating. Well, in India, we don't have much of home heating, but in the Western colder countries, it's used for home heating. So that consumes around 5%, 5 to 7% of fossil fuels as well. So fossil fuels is the bigger category. The second is industry. Just cement and steel contribute around 12-13% of the total greenhouse gases. If you look at cement, one of the major ingredients for cement manufacturing is limestone. So you heat limestone to convert it into lime. So limestone is CaCO3. You heat it, it gives out carbon dioxide and turns into CaO, which is lime, which is then kind of put through the process. Huge amount of carbon dioxide is emitted, right? Likewise for steel, you take iron ore, you first reduce the iron ore into metallic iron, and you do that by heating iron, mixing iron ore with coke. Coke is purified coal out of which carbon dioxide has been taken out. And when you are taking out the carbon dioxide from coal to make it into coke, you heat it in a environment so that all the oxygen in that or impurities get oxidized and get out by way of carbon dioxide, right? So that gives out a lot, and then you convert the metallic this thing into steel through a process which again gives out carbon dioxide. So these are very, very greenhouse gas intense processes and industries.
Interesting. So we talked
And
about
sorry, I missed the third one, which is land use and agriculture. And it's interesting because a lot of us think that something as natural as land and agriculture, how can that be a spoiler? But the fact is, it is. See, because as uh, human population has increased, or even animal population, we've had to clear out forests. And we've done that by either burning them or cutting them. If you burn them, of course, carbon dioxide is getting into the atmosphere. But if you cut them also, the foliage decomposes and carbon dioxide gets into the atmosphere. Then the farming techniques that we use, tilling the land. Each time you're tilling, you're bringing out organic matter which is settled in the ground. You're exposing it to heat, oxygen, moisture, and therefore it starts decomposing. So a huge amount of greenhouse gases get emitted each time you till. Then there is the whole process of cultivation for certain crops like rice and some others. You flood the fields. And when you flood the fields, the microbes which are underneath, they undergo anaerobic fermentation because of lack of oxygen. They're covered with water. And therefore they give out methane. Methane is 80 times as potent as carbon dioxide. Then there is food wastage, right? 33% of the food grown is wasted, and wasted food is decomposition, right? And again, we are adding. And then there's also cattle, ruminant animals, rather. So ruminant animals, unlike we human beings, have multiple stomachs because their feed is very complex sugars. If they eat grass and stuff like that, so some of the stomachs are used for fermentation to digest the food, and as that happens, methane is given out. That's how you see cattle belching sometimes with the white foam. That's basically methane coming out. So they're large contributors of methane, and then their manure and various other ways that they contribute to greenhouse gases as well.
Interesting. So even from a land use perspective, which happens to be the third factor, we are talking about multiple things. So let's say the cattle growing on the land, the forests being cut out so that cattle grows, and then of course from a typical food production point of view, let's say when we grow multiple crops, so all of those three factors combine. Right, right.
What you're doing is you're cutting off or erasing natural, trees or grasslands or whatever. So first is you're reducing the carbon absorption capacity of the earth, right, through photosynthesis each time you clear. Second, when you disturb the land, you're putting organic stuff or microbes which are buried underneath. You're exposing them to heat, air, water, and therefore the decomposition starts. So all of these kind of contribute to greenhouse gases.
So again, I think coming back to the factor that we mentioned earlier, it's so complex that when you see urbanization happening, you are using more cement and steel, right? So the industry is emitting. Then you are to ensure that urbanization happens, you're cutting down trees, right? So that becomes another factor. So even any country that's, let's say, going on the arc of development is through the process of not just generation of or production of, let's say, cement and steel, but also through the reduction of natural systems.
And also, the moment you grow, you need energy, right? I mean, if you're building a house or a factory, you will need energy, definitely. But I want to add here that development is inevitable, and you can't kind of get sidetracked, right? I mean, the West has all grown, right? They use energy. They've really kind of grown to that level. And now it's the turn of the developing world to do that. So we can't kind of say that, because of climate, the impact on climate, we won't develop. That won't be fair for people living in the developing world. So the solution lies that how do you kind of transition to green sources of energy, adopt green technologies for whether it's production of cement or steel, come up with regulations so that less of cement and steel is uh, used in the construction, uh, come up with regulations that if you're cutting down trees from some part, then equivalent or more, double the number of trees need to be planted somewhere else. So there are ways of doing a clean development, right? I think that's what we should be focused on